Hello, listeners, and thank you for checking out today's episode. My name is JC, and this is Blood and Ink, a horror genre podcast. I'm really excited to be doing this. I've always been a fan of everything horror, both in print and on screen. And really, this whole idea started because when I was young, I was the biggest bookworm you could find. But life gets busy, things happen, you go to college, you go to work, you got a family. So I got away from normal reading. And last year I realized that, and I didn't like it. So I went on a reading journey, and in that journey I found so many talented and undiscovered people writing some really cool stuff. I just wanted to create a platform where I could share these stories and talk about great movies of the genre with other people. And so that's what I'm doing here. This podcast is going to include 3 main corners. That's what I'm thinking. The first being Fright Bites. That'll be our flash fiction and short story narrations where I share some of the coolest stories floating around the internet. The second corner will be Movie Corner. Each week we'll recap and review a horror movie. I'm thinking at the end of each episode I'll let you know what the next movie is, and then we can watch it and review it in the following week. And the last corner will be Book of the Month. Each month, I'm going to be reading a new book. I'm hoping that you guys will read along, and I'll spend some time reviewing what's happening, what's sticking out, different themes in the books, crazy chapters, things like that. So, without further ado, let's get into our Fright Bites. Our first story is titled, I'm Being Eaten Alive, by Reddit handle Yougrandma. I was peacefully taking a shower when I noticed something strange. The side of my upper thigh was bleeding, but it wasn't just a cut, it was far worse. I leaned in closer, my hand shaking as I touched the skin. A deep, jagged hole like something had torn through the flesh, leaving a raw, exposed wound. The edges weren't smooth, they were shredded, as if they'd been gnawed or ripped apart. The skin around the hole was a sickly shade of pale, almost white, like it had been drained of color and blood pooled around the edges, dark and viscous. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The pain was sharp but distant, like it didn't quite belong to me, like it was something I should have felt earlier but hadn't. I pressed my fingers into the hole, feeling the raw, soft tissue slick with blood. The water from the shower kept flowing, turning a disturbing shade of red as it mingled with the blood on the floor. The scene felt almost unreal, like I was standing outside of myself watching this horror unfold. I tried to pull my hand away, but my fingers were sticky with blood clinging to the wound, as if it didn't want to let me go. A wave of nausea hit me, my stomach turning, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the gruesome sight. It wasn't right. This wasn't just an injury. This wasn't something that could happen by accident. I couldn't remember how it happened, why it was happening, but the reality of it, the visceral horror of seeing my own flesh torn open like that, was impossible to deny. I stumbled back, my head spinning, feeling dizzy and disoriented. The cold water continued to run, mixing with the blood on the floor, but it did nothing to calm the rising panic that was choking me. My hand trembled as I reached for the towel, unable to shake the feeling that I wasn't just bleeding. I was being consumed by something darker than I could understand. As I was processing what happened, I screamed for my husband, Steve, who came quickly running to help me. "What happened?" Steve asked, his voice cracking as his eyes fell on the huge wound on my body. I could see his skin lose color, his face going pale as if the blood had drained from him. His lips trembled, but his eyes were wide with panic. I could hear his breath getting shallow, his heart hammering so loudly it seemed to echo in the room. I watched him stumble back as the sight of me was too much, too real. His hands shook as he gently moved me, trying to wrap me in a towel. He wasn't speaking anymore, just moving mechanically, as if he were on autopilot. His touch was cold, too cold for comfort, and I felt a strange distance between us, like I was drifting away from him. I couldn't help but wonder, was this real? Was this really happening? As Steve dressed me and hurriedly got me into the car to take me to the doctor's, my 7-year-old son Tommy walked into the room. His small feet made almost no sound on the floor, and I didn't even realize he had entered until I saw him standing there, staring at me with wide, curious eyes. Tommy saw the wound. His eyes flicked over it briefly, but his expression didn't change. He didn't gasp, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. It was as if he was seeing something as normal as a scraped knee. No fear, no confusion, no concern. He didn't ask questions, didn't show a hint of worry. He just stood there, his hands casually clasped in front of him, like he was watching me as if nothing unusual was happening. His reaction, or lack of, haunts me to this day. It was almost as if he'd seen something like this before. It should have terrified me, the way he acted, how calm and detached he was. But it wasn't the wound that left me shaken. It was the cold emptiness in his eyes. The fact that he didn't even think it was strange. As I got to the hospital, the nurse who saw my wound looked confused, but also strangely intrigued. "What happened?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with disbelief. "I don't know," I whispered, still dazed. "I didn't even notice the wound until I took a shower." She frowned, her eyes narrowing as she examined me more closely. "You didn't notice something like that?" She shook her head, her expression turning from concern to doubt. "This isn't just a simple injury. This looks unusual." I couldn't understand what she meant, but the way she looked at the wound made my skin crawl. She cleaned it gently, her hands moving with care, but I could feel the weight of her gaze. She seemed almost fascinated, like this was some kind of puzzle she couldn't solve. After a long pause, she finally spoke again. "The wound, it looks like a laceration, but it's deep, and the edges are ragged, like something with a sharp, serrated edge tore through your skin. It could be an animal bite, or maybe something mechanical." Her voice trailed off, as though she was unsure of herself. "An animal bite?" My mind raced. I couldn't remember anything. No animal, no sharp object, nothing. It felt like a bad dream, but I was awake, and the wound was real. Too real. The day passed in a blur as we returned home. As I tried to settle into some semblance of normalcy, my husband Steve noticed something else that made my blood run cold. There was blood on the sheets. Not a lot, but enough to leave a dark stain on the fabric. "Whatever happened," he said, his voice tight, "was when you were sleeping. It must have been." His eyes flicked to me, and I could see the concern etched deep in his face, but there was something else there, too. Something I couldn't name. Fear? "Are you feeling any better?" Steve asked, his voice gentle, almost hesitant. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile, though every inch of my body was screaming at me. I wasn't feeling better. I wasn't sure I would ever feel better again. My fears were all gone as soon as I fell asleep. I woke up with a strange sensation of relief, as if the sleep I just had was liberating, like I somehow freed from whatever had been suffocating me. I didn't even remember the wound anymore. It felt as though it never existed. Steve wasn't there. He had woken up earlier than me to go to work. I sat on the edge of the bed feeling almost brand new, as if I had been reborn overnight. I turned my body to position my feet on the floor, but when I went to stand up, crack! A terrifying, sickening sound, the kind you never forget. The floorboard splintered beneath me and I collapsed, the impact jarring my entire body. I looked down at my feet. It was gone. A wave of cold panic flooded my chest. My foot, my fucking foot was missing. The spot where it should have been was just raw, empty space. Some blood, no flesh. Just a jagged, smooth stump where my foot used to be. How? I tried to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. I couldn't comprehend it. I reached down, my hands trembling, trying to feel the phantom foot that should have been there, but all I touched was skin. Soft skin, unnaturally cold, like a part of me had been removed in my sleep. My stomach twisted in disgust. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. I glanced at the sheet and my heart stopped. Something was there. Bones. Foot bones. And blood. Flesh missing. Pieces torn away as though something had violently stripped it from me while I lay unconscious. My own flesh. My own body. The stench of it all hit me sharp and foul, and I couldn't stop my body from convulsing, the nausea rising in my throat. I backed away, stumbling over the remnants of my own body, unable to make sense of what I was seeing. Was this real? I could feel my pulse racing in my throat, my mind spiraling into chaos. That didn't make sense. How could I have lost a foot overnight? I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. The questions were consuming me, but there was only one truth I knew. Something was horribly wrong, and I wasn't in control of it. Tommy came inside the room, holding his bunny toy tightly in his small hands. His eyes met mine, and I swear, for a brief moment, I saw something in them. Something not quite right. It wasn't the innocent look of a child. No, it was colder. It was knowing. He smiled, but it wasn't a normal smile. It was unsettling. He stood there, watching me, frozen in my fear, struggling to comprehend what was happening. His smile stretched wider, his eyes glinting in a way that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "It's nice to see you happy, Mommy," he said, his voice too calm, too knowing. His words crawled under my skin like worms, and for a split second I couldn't breathe. Happy? How could he think I was happy? My foot was gone. I was bleeding. What the hell was he talking about? I opened my mouth to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. I couldn't even form a coherent sentence as I watched Tommy move slowly towards me. Every step he took seemed deliberate, as if he was savoring the moment, his gaze fixed on me. He stopped right in front of me, crouching down to my level, his fingers gripping the bunny toy tightly in his knuckles, white with tension. He didn't flinch when his eyes dropped to the blood-stained sheets around me. I swear, he didn't even blink. Then he slowly placed the bunny toy on the bed beside me. But there was something wrong with it. The fabric, once soft and clean, was now darkened. It was stained with something. Something that wasn't just dirt. It was soaked in blood. The edges of the fabric frayed as though something sharp had torn through it. I couldn't look away from it. I felt a sharp pang in my stomach. Tommy tilted his head slightly, his smile still fixed in place. It was like he was studying me, waiting for me to react, but all I could do was stare, unable to move. "You're okay, Mommy," he whispered so quietly I could barely hear him, but the words sank deep. "We just have to wait." I felt the room close. I finally managed to compose myself, but my body felt like it was falling apart as I tried to stand. My left foot felt heavy, and I was only able to hobble on the other. With every step, the raw pain from my wound sent jolts through my body as I slowly made my way towards the mirror. I couldn't avoid the horror that was about to unfold. I stared at myself. What I saw was beyond recognition. My skin was an unnatural mottled color, half decayed with patches of blood and open sores that hadn't been there before. My body was no longer just a wound. It was a decaying, living corpse. I couldn't even comprehend how far my flesh had rotted away. The wounds, they were more than just cuts. They were chunks missing, like pieces of me had been violently scraped off, leaving behind exposed, yellowed muscle and bones. My face was unrecognizable. The once smooth skin now hung loosely, discolored and wrinkled, as if someone had tried to peel it off. I could smell the rot. This time, I knew I needed more than just medical help. I needed answers. I had to call the police. I had to understand what had happened to me. But even as I dialed, the confusion set in deeper. How could I not have noticed this? How could I have missed the fact that my body was being consumed piece by piece? There was no way this was normal. I couldn't trust myself. The ambulance arrived, and the nurses were horrified. They wrapped my foot, but their expressions were blank, filled with disbelief. They kept asking the same question over and over, like they couldn't quite make sense of it. How had I lost my foot and not even realized it? The words echoed in my head, spinning. I must have been drugged, I muttered, but even as I said it, it felt like a lie. No one was buying it. I was barely aware of time passing as I was transported to the hospital. My head was spinning, and I felt like I was floating through everything, detached from reality. Then I saw him, Steve. He looked frantic, his face pale as he rushed to my side. I wanted to reach for him, but the pain was unbearable, and my body was giving up on me. Before I could speak, the police were swarming the room. They started questioning me, their eyes wary, but there was something else there. Confusion. Why was I still conscious? Why hadn't I noticed the damage being done to myself? The questions didn't stop. My thoughts were all over the place. I didn't know what was real anymore. But then something else happened. The police turned to Steve. Their tone changed. I heard the words, "Major suspect," and my mind spun. Suddenly, they arrested him right there in front of me. What the hell? My heart raced as the truth slammed into me. My husband, arrested for cannibalism. Cannibalism. The word reverberated in my ears, and everything went cold. How could this be? My own husband eating me alive? I wanted to scream, to tell them they were wrong, but the words were trapped in my throat. I couldn't believe it. Steve would never. As they dragged him away, my mind raced. Something wasn't right. Why would they accuse him? Why now? I glanced at Tommy, who stood at the edge of the room. He was silent, his eyes empty, like he was in another world. It sent a chill down my spine. What if Tommy was somehow involved? He wasn't acting like my son anymore. He seemed different, out of control. I begged the officers to reconsider, but they wouldn't listen. They told me Steve was a threat, that he was dangerous, and they wouldn't release him until the investigation was over. They said it was all for my safety. My sister offered her house to me and Tommy, a place to stay after everything we'd been through. The air was thick with tension, and the silence between us was deafening. There was no long conversations, no gossiping, no laughter, not a single trace of happiness. My sister, who I once shared everything with, now looked at me with a mix of concern and fear. I could see it in her eyes, the way she tried to keep distance from me, as if she could smell the decay on me, both physical and mental. I can't believe Steve did this to you. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice trembling as she tried to comfort me. But the words hit me wrong. They didn't feel real. Steve didn't do anything to me, I replied coldly. There was venom in my voice that surprised even me. But it wasn't Steve. I knew that much. There was something else going on, something more sinister. Tommy was acting strangely too. He was quiet, but his discomfort was obvious. He didn't like my sister's house. He kept asking to go back home. I couldn't bear the thought of returning to the place where everything had gone wrong, especially without Steve. The house was empty, and it felt wrong to be there. But my sister's place had security cameras. If anything happened, at least I'd be able to see it, to prove Steve's innocence. I didn't want to sleep. Every part of my body ached with exhaustion, but the fear inside me wouldn't let me rest. What if something happened while I slept? What if I woke up dead? The thought didn't seem as crazy as it should. I'd already lost pieces of myself in ways I couldn't explain. My mind was unraveling, and I didn't know what was real anymore. I was scared of my own son. Tommy wasn't the same. He was different, corrupted. He watched me in a way that made my skin crawl, his eyes cold and distant. I couldn't bring myself to sleep next to him. Every part of me screamed that he could hurt me, even though I knew he was just a child. But the paranoia was strong. He wasn't my Tommy anymore. And still, despite my fear, my body betrayed me. The painkillers I took earlier kicked in, making my eyelids heavy. I tried to fight it, but sleep dragged me down anyway. I managed to stand on one foot, the pain unbearable. My vision was blurry, and every step felt like I was being torn apart from the inside. I stumbled through the dark,
falling multiple times, but pushing myself up again each time, desperate to reach the room with the security cameras.
When I finally reached the door, my hand shook as I gripped the doorknob. I could see my reflection in the polished surface, a grotesque, barely recognizable face staring back at me. My skin was stretched thin and mottled, hanging loosely in some places, while other areas were raw and torn. My hair was sparse, falling in clumps. It looked like I had been ravaged by something monstrous. I shoved the door open and stumbled into the room. The video from last night began to play, flickering as the screen filled with static before the image settled. And then I saw it. The monster. It moved with a grotesque, inhuman grace, its body twisted and malformed, half human, half something worse. Its jagged, trembling hands dug into my flesh with savage hunger, ripping it apart as if the very act of tearing was a need more primal than hunger itself. The sickening sound of flesh being torn away echoed in the room, each gnashing bite a violent, brutal noise that drowned out everything else. I could hear the wet snap of skin, the grotesque crunch of bone breaking, the desperate, hungry gulps as it swallowed chunks of what could only be pieces of me. The sound was unbearable, wet, slopping, tearing, as if the very fabric of my body was being shredded in real time. Every single bite felt like a piece of my soul was being consumed, each pull of its hands leaving a trail of agony that seared through every nerve in my body. It wasn't just my flesh it tore at, it was everything. My insides twisted and writhed in horror as I watched it devour me, my skin falling away in strips, my muscle exposed in ghastly rawness. The blood, so much blood, spilled out, a flood of crimson pooling on the floor as I gasped in horror, but the monster never stopped. Its mouth, God, the mouth, it stretched impossibly wide, wider than any human mouth could open, as it gorged itself, sucking down mouthfuls of my flesh. Each time it bit into me, it felt like my very bones were being pulled from their sockets. I could feel the sharp, excruciating pain of each bite, the pressure of its teeth sinking deep into me, the wetness, the warmth of my own blood trickling down my body felt like it was drowning me. The taste of my own body being consumed filled my senses with a nauseating, impossible feeling. I could almost hear it. My own blood being swallowed, my skin scraping away in agonizing waves of horror. I wanted to scream, but the terror had stolen my voice. Every part of me fought to move, to escape, but my body was failing. It was breaking apart, each piece of me becoming a feast for something that couldn't possibly be real, couldn't be happening. My limbs were being torn from me, my foot, my arm, pieces of my torso, and still it devoured me as if nothing mattered but the hunger. I could feel the blood rushing from me, could hear the cracking of bones, the tearing of flesh, the sound of my body breaking apart under the relentless, mindless assault. I was drowning in it, the dark pit of terror pulling me down. The monster never stopped, never hesitated. It feasted on me with a twisted, insatiable hunger that made my insides writhe in horror. The worst part, the absolute worst part, was how calm it seemed. How it went about its grotesque meal without a single flicker of hesitation. There was nothing humane in that hunger. It wasn't just feeding. It was devouring me with the frenzy of something starved for years. A monster with no mercy. I felt the last remnants of my strength fading. My body could no longer fight, and my mind was collapsing under the weight of what was happening. There was no escape. No way out. Every movement it made, every tear of my flesh, every bit it consumed, it was all a reminder that this wasn't a nightmare. This was my reality, and it would never end. There was no ending to this, only more. I would never escape. And then, with a sickening clarity, I realized the truth. The monster is myself. Wow, so I really like this story. I feel like it leaves a lot for us to interpret. I love the descriptions on the actual, you know, missing body pieces or us decaying from within and from within ourselves, us being eaten alive, as the title of the story goes. But again, a lot for us to interpret in that one. You know, did Steve have something to do with what's going on? Is the narrator of this story lying to themselves about that? At the end, we find out the narrator themselves is the monster. So, what does that mean? And then there's to discuss Tommy, the creepy son. But really, is he creepy? Has he seen this before with his mother? And if so, what does that mean? I'd really be interested to know what you guys think about this story and what you believe us being the monster could mean in this context. Again, this was from Reddit handle Yougrandma. Funny name, love that. But yeah, just really love the way that the story was done. Now, if any of my listeners out there have any stories that they find interesting or have written any short stories themselves that maybe they want to have read on the podcast, you can go ahead and send those in. And that email is bloodinkpodcast@gmail.com. So yeah, send in your short stories, comment on this podcast, let me know what you thought about this story. And now that leaves us with movie review. So the movie that I watched this week was The Substance. I had heard so much about this movie. It seemed like everywhere I turned, somebody was talking about this movie. And usually when movies are like that, I get a little weary. I'm like, oh, here we go, another super popular horror I'm gonna have these ideas that it's gonna be this great movie everyone's talking about, and then it kind of lets you down, or it's just something that had been done before. And let me tell you right now, The Substance was not like that at all. I was lucky enough to not know anything about this movie going in. I hadn't seen any commercials. Anytime I heard anybody talking about it, whether it be on TV or a podcast or a radio show, whatever, I would skip forward. I did not want to hear about it because I really wanted to watch it. So I did watch it this week. Me and my wife watched it. It was not what I expected, which was awesome. So I did take some notes on The Substance, and we'll do a little recap and talk about the movie. I will say I was really high when I took these notes, and reading through them a little bit before I started the podcast, I was laughing at myself, but we'll get right into it. The movie starts off, shows an egg on a blue background. It gets injected with some sort of substance, the substance, and whoa, those two eggs, or that one egg turns into two eggs. And I wrote in my notes, in this economy, hell yeah. But yeah, the scene was uncomfortable. It was kind of weird. The use of contrast and color in this movie was super awesome. So yeah, that blue background, super deep blue against this white egg with this super green substance going into it and creating two eggs. That's just the opening scene. Moves on to where we meet Elizabeth Sparkle. She is a fitness influencer of the time, I guess you could say. So she's doing these fitness videos, like, think Taibo, kickboxing style, but I don't even remember what you would call it. But yeah, she's doing workout videos. She's the hot thing, blah, blah, blah. But she's now gotten older. So we all know that in Hollywood, on the big screen, you've got to be the young, hot, new thing. So she finishes taping one of her workout videos, goes to the bathroom. I guess the female's bathroom is locked. I don't really remember. So she runs into the men's bathroom, and this is where we meet the guy that runs her workout videos. He's super gross, and they do such a good job in this movie of just, as soon as you meet him, you're like, oh, I hate this guy. He looks disgusting, and all the camera angles that they take of him, he's just, everything he does is nasty. So we finally meet him. He goes to the urinal while Elizabeth Sparkle's in the bathroom, and she overhears him on the phone just saying that she's aged out. They need someone young and hot, and he's peeing and like snorting and just being absolutely disgusting. So after hearing this, Elizabeth is distraught and she's driving home. She gets distracted by a billboard of herself while driving home. So obviously very full of herself. Still, there's some weird stuff there. But anyway, gets distracted, gets into a car accident, and ends up at the hospital. At the hospital, she meets this weird-looking nurse, may I say. I think he was supposed to be, like, young and youthful and all this, but I thought he looked weird. So, meets this weird-looking nurse. He's like, hey, I know you, or something. Like, I know how this feels. And hands her this flash drive. So, she gets back home, looks at the flash drive. The flash drive is the substance video, which is supposed to, I guess, sell you on the substance. But I'll tell you this right now, nothing in that video made me want to take the substance. That video was weird, it was freaky, and I would have done what Elizabeth does, which is throw it in the trash. Which, like I said, she does that. She throws it in the trash, and I believe she was sitting there in her home looking at the giant picture of herself that she had in her home, and then decides to go ahead and take that out of the trash. So she's not handling her aging very well. She's really having some difficulty with aging and kind of aging out and not being the youngest, hottest thing out there. So yeah, she ends up calling the people. There's this whole weird pickup process. She goes to, looks like an abandoned building, but that's actually where she's picking up her substance. So she receives a package, and I wrote in my notes, actually injects herself like a junkie with some backyard green shit, which, yeah, let's not just pick up random liquids and inject them into ourselves, but okay. So she goes down, she's in her bathroom, she goes down, she's writhing. It looks painful. She's not having fun times. It looks like she's about to come out of her skin, which is exactly what happens. Her back cracks open and a new her steps out of her back. I thought it was super weird. I thought it would be like a younger version of her. I mean, it's definitely a younger version of somebody, but it's not, it doesn't look like a younger version of her. And this younger version is Sue. Sue is played by Margaret Qualley. Super cool, showing the effect inside of the body while all this was happening. That was like some really cool transformation shots and things. But yeah, Sue comes out of Elizabeth Sparkle, and here we learn a couple of things. This is not a completely different person. No, this is still Elizabeth. It's just as the commercial said, a newer, better version of herself, a younger version of herself. And there's also a lot of things that they have to do to keep them stable, I guess. That's what they call it, the stabilizing. So for 7 days, she gets to be this young version of herself, Sue, but she does need to do some stabilizing every day at a specific time. Otherwise, the bodies seem to kind of fall apart and crash out. And then after 7 days, without any issue, they have to be able to transition back into their old body. They have to do that process to transition back into the original body. Otherwise, there can be what we find out. Well, we find that out later. I'll save that for later. So, Sue is here. She's hot. She's new. And hey, guess what? At that executive at Elizabeth's company says we need a hot new person and a hot new aerobics instructor. So Sue goes for that job and she gets it. They love her. She's doing great at first. Looks like everything's going really well. Sue actually seems really cool. Seems like she's having a great time. And here we go. It is the last day. It's the 7th day. They've got to get ready to transition back. There's this whole IV hookup situation that they have to do. And so that's what Sue does. She sets up the IVs, switches back into Elizabeth's body. And when that happens, in this movie, there's so much like face trauma that happens. So Sue falls straight on her face, and they show it. It happens in multiple scenes where people are just falling on their faces, and it's just like, okay, that it's just shocking. But anyway, Elizabeth is back. She's in her old raggedy body again. She's unhappy. It's been the 7 days, so at this point she's got to go pick up her refill. And she just gets mail saying the refill is ready. And I wrote in a note, I'm like, is nobody paying for this? This shit just free over here? But they never talk about that. There's never any payment plan. I'm like, okay, tell me where. So Elizabeth just kind of sits around. She's not taking care of herself. She's eating like crap, super unhappy, just not taking care of her body, whatever. Can't wait to make the switch back. Makes the switch back into Sue. When she becomes Sue, all of a sudden she's building this hidden room for the Elizabeth body. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, you just don't want like a random body in your bathroom. So that makes sense. But then another part of me was like, oh no, she's going to try to stow the body in there and not change. But, yeah, in my notes I wrote, she better not try to hide the body in there. The rules say every 7 days, bitch. But anyway, Sue has her first dance aerobics taped class thing. And it was so awkward and awful to watch. She's dancing around on this stage, trying to twerk. And, you know, I'm sure Margaret Qualley is a great person. The twerking wasn't happening for me. She looked like she was a cat trying to throw up a hairball. So that was interesting. But anyway, Sue is feeling her nuggets. She loves, everything's going well for her. Her career's going well. She goes out. She meets this guy, brings him back to her house, and she's ready to get it. She's ready to get her nuggets off. You know what I mean? So the guy comes up, and all of a sudden, Sue's body starts freaking out. Because at this point, it has been another 7 days. She should be switching back into her original body, as stated in the rules. So she goes to Elizabeth's body and pulls out more stabilizer from Elizabeth's body, even though she should not be doing that. And the process is actually really gross. It involves a super large needle going right into the spine and like withdrawing what looks like some sort of spinal fluid. So she does that, injects the stabilizer, gets her rocks off with Homeboy, and then next thing we know, she has switched back into the original older Elizabeth body. Elizabeth wakes up, she's not looking the best. She goes to take a shower, and that's where we see it. She's got this dead, gross old lady finger. I mean, they do make it look really bad in the movie, and you're like, oh my god, and it's awful, and it's noticeable, and you've got Demi Moore, who's, like I said, starting to just not look as good anyway, but then she's got that big, nasty dead finger, and you're like, oh my god. She's trying to wash it off. It's like, no, that's part of you now. I think this part is hilarious. She gets out of the shower, and she calls the substance, like, customer support line, and is trying to complain to them, and they're like, well, you did this. We told you you had 7 days in each body, and this is what happens. You're stealing from yourself. And Elizabeth tries to argue with the customer support and is like, no, this was Sue. I didn't do this. And they're like, listen, they're both you. You're the same person. It's the same mind. And at this point, customer support tells her, because she's kind of feeling over it, well, hey, you can stop at any time. There's no reversing the stuff that's already happened, but you don't have to continue. You can finish this. And Elizabeth declines because, hey, being young and hot felt awesome for her. So she goes and picks up her next installment, her next re-up. But you can tell she's not feeling good about herself. She's got her hands covered up, obviously, because you can't be walking around with a dead finger. And she goes, sits at a restaurant. And at the restaurant, she meets that super young, weird nurse that originally gave her the flash drive, with the substance video on it. Well, he's not young and hot. He's actually this old, grody man. And he basically says, hey, this is super lonely. When you are living as your younger self, it feels great, but actually it's lonely, and the 7 days is not enough time, and it almost doesn't feel worth it. And here we can really see that both of them are jealous. They are jealous of their younger selves. But it's kind of weird because their younger selves are not different people. again, it's them. So they're almost jealous of themselves and the success that they are having as their younger, fresher self. So to make herself feel better, Elizabeth Sparkle reaches out to an old, I think it was a high school person that kind of liked her and wants to go on a date with this guy. He's kind of nerdy, but all about her, and in a weird way, it's kind of cute. And so they agree to go on a date, but she's at home getting ready. She's trying to do her makeup. She starts getting crazy with it, like taking her makeup off and putting it back on because she doesn't like how it looks, and maybe she just doesn't feel pretty enough or young enough. And so she declines the date, or I say decline, but she just doesn't answer the phone or meet him at the restaurant, which asshole move. And instead decides to sit at her home and basically mukbang a whole bunch of fried chicken and nasty stuff and sit there and watch TV. And at this point, over the course of the movie, like her image is just deteriorating. She's looking nasty, her hair is looking stringy, her eyes are looking sunken in, and she's definitely just not doing good. And she is doing these things, this eating awful, not taking care of herself, not exercising on purpose at this point to get back at her younger body for doing what it did to her by giving her this old gross finger. We move into one of the weirdest nightmare dream sequences I think I've ever seen in a movie. Probably not, but the one I can think of now. And we're young Sue, and a chicken wing, which is from all the chicken and stuff that Elizabeth was eating. Well, a chicken wing pops out of her butt, and she pulls some chicken out of her belly button, and it's super weird. But again, that's just a nightmare scene. Sue wakes up and she looks around. The house is disgusting. It's a mess. Sue hates that her old body is just what she believes just wasting time and just destroying what they're trying to build. Again, kind of weird to be saying it this way because they're both the same person. But because of this, and because she's destroying her body, and because she's destroying the home, Sue's kind of like, well, fuck you then. And she, again, takes more days than she should have. And so she's pulling more spinal fluid out of the spine. At this point, that wound's looking kind of pussy and gross, and they're sticking that needle right in there. Also, when you write pussy in your notes, it can get really confusing. Reading that, I was like, whoa, this is not that kind of podcast. What's happening here? I don't remember that part. No, but so she takes more days than she needs to, or than she's supposed to, and it finally switches back. At this point, Elizabeth wakes up, and she's ragged, okay? She's not looking good. She has become old in a lot of places, like half her face, like, whew, girl, it's not looking good, okay? And it happened quick. But not only did she start not looking good, like, she's going crazy at this point. She calls, again, maybe wanting to stop this. She's complaining about Sue, and again, she refuses. She still wants to be the Matrix. She still wants to be able to do this, which is crazy, but I don't know. At that point, I mean, at that point, what do? You're kind of screwed because, again, she was not looking good. And she's going crazy. She's like pounding her head. She's like, stop it. What am I doing? She's got to stop, blah, blah, blah. Again, talking like it's a different person. Well, it's not a different person. But she still cannot wait to return to that young body, that young Sue body. So she does. She returns back to the Sue body. Sue is pissed again, kind of the same thing going on there. And at this point, Sue's like, I'm not switching back. So Sue just starts using up that spinal fluid. She's like, this is me. I'm here. This is who I am now. Everything's going really well for her. Her career's going well. She's going to end up singing at Times Square for like New Year's. She's doing the whole thing. And yeah, she's super excited for it. That time's coming up. She starts dating someone. He's like staying at the house with her. It appears like months go by. So much so that She goes to pull some more spinal fluid up because her body's freaking out and saying like, hey, you need to stabilize or switch. And she goes to pull spinal fluid up, and damn, Sue had drained her dry. There was no spinal fluid left. At that point, she's forced to switch. She doesn't want to, but she's like, I'm gonna die. I gotta switch. So that's what she does. She switches, and let me tell you, Elizabeth's body is, at this point, she's a monster. Okay, she is old. She's hunched over. She has some weird saggy boobies. It is uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable to watch at this point. You're just like, oh my god. It's like kind of disgusting. So, she calls and she's like, I'm done. That's it. Enough. So she gets the new substance that's going to terminate Sue and kind of end this whole process. So she starts the termination process. She sticks Sue, starts pushing in that termination liquid, and it's almost all the way in, and then she stops. At this point, she's kind of second guessing. She's like, oh no, I'll never be this young, hot person again. What am I going to do? So she stops. All of a sudden, Sue wakes up. But Elizabeth is still there as her old monstrous self. They both wake up. There's two, at this point, there's two Elizabeths. They're alive at the same time. And young her sees that she was almost terminated. And she goes beast mode. She goes crazy. She is fucking old her up. Like, she's throwing her face in the mirror. Again, face scene. She's beating the crap out of the Elizabeth body, which is now this monster body. Why is she so strong? I don't know. But then I'm also thinking, hey, like, they're themselves. Like, you're killing yourself, which has been the whole thing of this movie, hasn't it? Like, you're doing things to harm yourself later, even if you don't have those immediate effects now. Also, I was confused. I was kind of like, well, hey, wait, can you kill the Matrix? Because, again, that original Elizabeth body is the Matrix. I would assume you kind of need that, so maybe don't kill the thing that will still keep you alive. But yeah, she's literally beating her own self to death. So, at this point, she's still going to try to do the New Year's Eve show. This is, the Sue body. She's, killed the Elizabeth body, so the Matrix is gone. She's coughing. She doesn't feel well. She seems like she feels like she's dying. Basically, this Sue body is decaying. Her teeth are coming out. She runs home, realizing that she still has a small amount of the substance left, that she actually didn't use all of the substance. So she injects the rest of the substance, and changes start to happen. But at this point, they seem multiplied. It almost feels like Inception, like a dream within a dream. It's like, okay, the original Matrix is dead, so you can't be the new Matrix, but that's what she's trying for. And the new thing that comes cracking out of her back is a monster. It's awful. There's, Demi Moore's face is stuck on the back of this monster as like the original face, and it's got pieces of both of them, and it's gross. It's gross to look at. It's a weird monster, worse than Elizabeth Sparkle's weird old lady body. But I love the monster. It is so campy and awful to look at, and it's like kind of funny. It tries to put an earring on like the side of its ear, but it doesn't have ears, so it just kind of sticks the earring in the side of its head, and it's got these curlers on these tiny little strings of hair. Yeah, the monster was something I personally find awesome. It brings me back to like original weird campy horror. And I think the best part is that this last form of Elizabeth actually cuts out a picture of Elizabeth's original face and puts it on its own face. But anyway, this monster goes out, goes to the New Year's Eve party, gets on stage. Of course, the mask falls, the crowd sees what is behind that mask and loses it. People start going crazy, the monster's freaking out, the people just like storm the stage and bash the monster's head in. Well, a whole new head just grows out of the old bashed in head area, and then the ending gets so wild. All of a sudden, a boob is coming out of this monster's eye socket, or maybe out of its mouth. I believe it was the eye socket. Blood starts spraying everywhere. What the fuck is happening? The monster dies. The OG face that was on the monster. So again, this is Demi Moore's original face that was, starting the movie. At this point, that's the only thing left of the monster. It's part of like some octopus-like body. Well, that thing crawls out and crawls in onto Elizabeth Sparkle's star that is on Hollywood Boulevard. It sits there and then it dies. And that's the end of the movie. But yeah, the ending gets super campy. I'm not against campy horror. I know some people are like, hey, that's not my thing, and that's fine. I personally feel like this movie was just kind of paying homage to that original campiness. And I really like the theme of this movie. I think a lot of people could turn around and easily say, well, Demi Moore's character, Elizabeth Sparkle, well, she's just a bad person. She's selfish. She, doesn't want to grow old, doesn't want to give up her limelight. I think that's a really easy thing to say, but I think we have to think about, well, what gets people there, and especially women. I feel like this movie is really highlighting the societal pressures that are put on women to be forever young, to be forever this, to be forever the hot thing. And, as she was getting older, which, it's Demi Moore. She's beautiful at her age. You know what? Let me look up her age real quick. Okay, yeah, I just looked up Demi Moore's age. She's 62. Yeah, I would have never thought, but she looks great. But at the end of the day, Demi Moore is still so much more than just her looks, because we all know we're all going to age. Nothing is forever. Youth is not forever. But a lot of people are told that's all that you have. And especially, I couldn't imagine in a place like LA or, Hollywood having to deal with that. So I would say I believe that to be the major theme of this movie. There's also themes of, just not loving yourself, not doing what's best for yourself, doing things that might not hurt yourself now, but are going to hurt yourself in the future, and not really worrying about what's to come from that. And then just the everyday battle that most people have with themselves, and just with loving themselves and loving who you are. Sadly, in this movie, Elizabeth Sparkle didn't like who she was. Ultimately, she liked that other people liked her, or maybe that's just what she was told her whole life being in LA, that this is what she had to be, and now that she wasn't that anymore, she had no purpose. So yeah, I loved this movie. It made me feel uncomfortable. It had awesome cinematography. I really liked the message of the movie. So I give this movie like 5 stars. This is definitely one of my new favorite movies. I'm not sure if it exactly fits in the top 5, but it's up there. Like, I really liked this movie, so this was awesome. And that's what we have for the substance. Next week, what I want to recap and review is actually just a dramatic horror short. You can find it on Netflix. It is called The Blue Drum, and that is directed by Angelita Mendoza, starring Crystal Hernandez, Jonathan Medina, and who else is in this? Let's see. Judith Scarpone. Again, that's a horror short. It runs about 16 minutes. That's my plan to watch that. If you do have any requests or any movies that you want to hear talked about on the podcast or recapped or reviewed, go ahead and send those recommendations in. Again, that Gmail is bloodinkpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your horror recommendations. Sorry, I do see this podcast is going a little bit long. It is the first episode, so just trying to figure out how everything's going to go. And I guess our last order of business is book club. So just real quick, again, first episode, so don't expect everybody to be reading what I'm reading, but currently I just started reading in the past week Stephen King's The Stand. This book is large. This book is large and in charge. I'm reading the full, extended version. It's not really extended, I guess more just the original version. When he published this book originally, he was asked to cut out a lot of stuff. So that shortened the book. I'm reading his original as it was meant to be, and that's running, I believe it's about 1,300 pages. So I just started reading it not too long ago. I believe I'm only 20% through the book. So far, it's weird to read this book right now, after what everyone has gone through with COVID. If you don't know, The Stand is a post-apocalyptic kind of dark novel written by Stephen King, and it does have epidemic that is present in the book. I don't want to give too much away. Again, this first episode, if people do want to read it, I want them to be able to read it without giving too much away, but it is crazy to be reading this, and after being what we went through, seeing how similar or just how on the nose Stephen King was able to get this book. I read that he had actually talked with a bunch of doctors and in regards to how the spread of something like this would happen or what it might look like. And even in the book, the government kind of tries to keep everyone calm and just say, hey, this is it's just a super flu. Don't worry about it, blah, blah, blah. So reading this with the site that we have now has just been harder than I expected, I would say. I might have a little bit of trauma when it comes to COVID. I am a medic firefighter in my regular day job, and so having to deal with all that, and now reading this book, it's hitting me a little different than I really expected it would. I think, and it's crazy because, let's see, this book was originally published in 1978, so he was way before his time writing this book. But I love Stephen King. I love that he doesn't rush any of his novels. He really makes you feel connected to the characters. And I'll tell you, with this book being 1,300 pages, I'm sure it's not rushed, and it's not feeling rushed so far. So if you want, go ahead, start reading The Stand. If you like Stephen King and you haven't read The Stand, so far I'm really enjoying it. I don't want to talk too much about it because if you guys do want to read it, I don't want to kind of ruin that for you. But that is what I'm reading right now. After The Stand, which is this month's book for me, my next book is going to be Sea of Rust, and that is written by C. Robert Cargill. Don't know if I'm saying that right. I hope I am. If you can't tell, I'm kind of on a post-apocalyptic kick right now. But if there are any books that you guys would like to read or any recommendations, I would love to see them. So again, either go ahead and comment on the podcast or send us a Gmail at bloodinkpodcast@gmail.com. And that is today's episode. I really appreciate everyone that listened today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, go ahead and like, review, comment, all that good stuff. I'm not used to saying that. It kind of feels weird to say. I hear all the podcasters I listen to say that, and now I'm on this end saying it. But again, thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think, and I look forward to speaking with you guys next week.